There's very few builds in Destiny 2 that give you unlimited and endgame crowd control shutdown potential. Now this one's based on the Broodweaver for the Strand Warlock, and it all actually starts with the Sunshot Exotic Hand Cannon. Now you might think I'm actually going a little bit crazy here, but hear me out. Now it's all because of its destructive power, really. I mean, Sunshot is the flavour of the month in terms of solo builds, but for this Strand build it's really underrated. It's got just the high power potential because of all the buffs from hand cannons that I've had recently, but the exotic perk which fires explosive rounds, and then also from Sunblast where targets that are damaged and killed by Sunshot explode, and that all just combines really nicely with the Strand setup that we've got on. And this Strand setup, like I say, is going to shut down, and it's going to allow you for massive crowd control in lots of content, whether that's basic patrol activities, legend lost sectors, dungeons, raids, or even the new exotic mission. It's just going to allow you to unravel everything. It's going to allow you to destroy all the tangles that we're going to create. It's going to allow you to destroy all the suspended enemies, and it's just a massive chain of all that, which then ultimately ends up in Threadlings and Unraveled Threads attacking everything, and you're just using a solar hand cannon. The synergy with it doesn't sound like it's going to be there, but it actually is. Like I said, this one's all based around suspending targets, and the main thing that we're going to be doing here is absolutely relying on the Wanderer aspect. Now this one released a few seasons ago and actually was rather lackluster in terms of the fanfare that it received, but there's really been no adjustments to it, there's been no changes, it's just kind of gone under the radar, and the Wanderer is definitely one of the main aspects that I use on my Strand Warlock no matter what builds I'm actually using. But here it's just actually awesome, because you've got a buff to the tangles which allows you to throw them, and then when they detonate they suspend targets, and then with these suspended targets we're going to be leaning in with a few fragments, which we've got the Thread of Wisdom which is going to create orbs of power on defeating suspended targets, and we've also got the Thread of Mind where defeating suspended targets is going to grant you class ability energy. Now ultimately this all lays back into grenade energy. You could use the Thread of Generation, but with it being nerfed I don't think it's as strong, so you want to be using that class ability energy to try and get your grenade energy back through the bomber mods on your class item, and also by maximising your recovery stat either through getting high recovery stat up to 100. As you can see, mine is only at 70, so we're heavily relying on that Thread of Wisdom, but we're also going to rely on the Font of Restoration, which is going to give us armor charge stacks, and these are going to deplete over time and give us a boost to our recovery stat, which should all in all push it to that magical 100 and give us our class ability back in literally about 15 to 20 seconds, depending on how many orbs of power and stuff we can create, which as you'll see with the gameplay in the background, we're creating bunches of orbs of power pretty often. So slamming that down and you relying on bomber, you're going to get your grenade back, which then all ties back into our aspects, and we're going to look at the Mindspun Invocation, because you're going to want to consume your grenade, specifically the Shackle Grenade, which is going to activate the Weaver's Trance buff. Now with Weaver's Trance, again this lays back into Sunshot, and because of the damage output that Sunshot is doing, Final Blows whilst you've got Weaver's Trance active is going to suspend everything nearby, and obviously you're going to take out trash ads pretty much instantly with Sunshot, but anything that's still alive, even from them Sunblast explosions, are still going to create that suspending detonation, and they're just easy cannon fodder to clean up, whether you're using your Sunshot still or you go back to your favourite, or should I say everyone's favourite fusion rifle at the minute with Scattershot, and obviously that's a Strand weapon, and again that leans into not only the Cypher mods that we have on our helmet, but it also leans into the artifact in terms of giving us unraveling rounds when we collect orbs of power. Obviously we're already going to be creating a few orbs of power from defeating suspended targets, as well as, like I say, the Cypher mods, so we've got a ton, an absolute ton of orbs of power going, and that scatter signal is going to benefit massively from unraveling rounds and just deal more damage to targets, unraveling them, which then sends further unraveled threads to targets to cause further damage to them. And then on top of that, if that wasn't enough, damaging unraveled targets with a weapon will occasionally spawn a Threadling. Now, unraveled targets, like I said, can be anybody, especially from this build, because your Tangles are going to unravel targets, your Threadlings are going to unravel targets, and you are going to be getting unraveled targets through your Strand weapons of choice, and these are going to spawn Threadlings, which you can even spawn them from Sunshot, as crazy as it sounds. Now, these Threadlings are going to cause massive damage. Absolutely massive damage because of the recent buff to the Thread of Evolution, which makes Threadlings travel further and deal more damage. You also get a sweet little intellect boost, which is nothing to be sniffed at because the Broodweaver Super is absolutely devastating for dealing decent damage to bosses, and it'll melt champions and anything else that's pretty much in its path, to be honest with you. It's going to do all the work that you need it to do. So obviously we've been set up in terms of suspended targets, we're going to be unravelling everything, but also we want to maximise that Threadling generation, and we're going to do that through the Swarmer's exotic leg armour on the Warlock, where destroying any Tangle will spawn a Threadling, and these Threadlings now also unravel targets that they damage, again boosting the unravelling Thread rounds. And if you can see from the gameplay, I mean, there's just a whole load of green mess going absolutely everywhere, and this is just from the devastating combination of all the stuff that we've got going on, from suspended targets, all the Tangles that are going on, all the Threadlings, Sunshot doing its thing, and then also from the artifact mods, and it just easily allows you to clear tons of enemies. It's going to allow you to shut down areas, deal with yellow bars, deal with champions. Obviously, if you're going to suspend targets either through Weaver's Trance or through the Shackle Grenade by just throwing them, that's going to deal with unstoppable champions. And also, if you manage to get unravelling rounds, which you're gonna, because we're going to have tons of orbs of power, whether you're using your Strand weapon of choice. On this build we have the Makato machine gun, which is new this season. Again, unravelling rounds, that's going to deal with barrier champion shields, and you're going to have pretty much near infinite uptime on all of this. And if that wasn't enough, we've also got Makato, a pretty decent role that I managed to snag. I'm not sure it's going to be everyone's cup of tea, but in terms of this build, it really does the business, because we've got Demolitionist, which is going to allow us to generate grenade energy on defeating targets, again leaning back into getting that Weaver's Trance back and keeping that going as often as possible. But we've also got Hatchling, which is again going to create a Threadling. So not only have we got Threadlings coming from unraveled targets, coming from Tangles, we've also got them coming from Makato. The whole area is just going to be massively shut down. Enemies are just going to unravel and be defeated without you even looking at them, and whether that's through Makato, through Sunshot, the unraveled targets, Tangles, you name it, this build has got it. And if you do manage to get one of these machine guns and you want to chuck it into this Strand build, I highly recommend it, because it does do the business. It's not massive in terms of damage, but like we had a bit of a showcase of this one in the exotic mission, and you know, you can spec into it as much as you want in terms of dealing with high burst DPS. Obviously we've got the scatter signal with the god roll of overflow and controlled burst. That's going to allow you to do good top tier damage. And if you want to swap out Makato for literally any other weapon, whether that's a Strand weapon such as the grenade launcher from the Root of Nightmares raid, which is also very good at the minute. It's got Envious Assassin and Surrounded. Surrounded obviously going to give you that massive 40% damage boost. Envious Assassin is just going to massively overflow the magazine, so you can effectively do 16 or more grenades in literally one magazine. Very good on a ton of bosses, and actually really good in solo content as well. But you can even just go away from that if you want and get Apex Predator going. Literally any heavy weapon of choice will fit into this build, because the whole build is set up around either using your Sunshot or your scatter signal to get all the abilities going, whether that's through your Weaver's Trance, getting everything suspended, which then is going to allow you to just control the battlefield. And then if you really want, you can obviously keep peppering stuff with your Arcane Needle melee, which is going to unravel targets. Again, the unraveled targets I think is massively slept on with Strand, but it is one of the main things that you need to get going in your Strand builds, because just the damage over time and constant peppering of other enemies in a room or wherever you are, it just really helps to just deal with everything. And Like I say, most unraveled targets, as long as the tangle cooldown is gone, will turn into tangles, and again that leans back into our Wanderer, which if you throw them or destroy them, they're going to suspend targets, and it's just a massive chain of dealing with suspended enemies, creating orbs of power, unraveling enemies, creating Threadlings, and just shutting everything down. Like I said in my walkthrough for the exotic mission, the survivability of this build isn't obvious. Obviously we've only really got the healing rift. We've also got Thread of Warding, which is going to grant us Woven Mail, which does grant us a really good damage resistance, but the survivability is by being aggressive and being on the front foot with this one. You know, you've not got that constant healing, that constant restoration. You have a little bit of damage reduction, but it's all about just taking control, suspending the targets, because then when they're suspended, they're not going to cause you any issues. They can't attack you as easily, they can't deal damage to you as easily, and pretty much everything all the way up to a boss can be suspended, and this build just really does have everything in terms of end game potential. So I hope you liked this little build breakdown. Again, we're going a little bit more casual with them. Check out the mods in the dim link down below. Make sure you're chucking on your Strand surges and all that good stuff. And honestly, I mean, switching between this and a solar build is going to be easy because you've got Sunshot going, everyone's using Scatter Signal, chuck on your heavy weapon of choice. Strand is still flavour of the month in terms of surges on most activities. It is pretty much Strand the build. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, hope you did. Thank you very much.